Hello everyone, this is Jessica Lee with Screencast-O-Matic assignment number 6. We're going to be going through 5 of the major things on the timeline. So the first thing that I chose to do was Bell Labs invents the modem in 1958. I found a great website called computinghistory.org, and it says that there is a need to transmit data for North American air defense, so efforts are made to accomplish the goal of data transfer across the existing telephone wires. The air defense was using modems at the end of the 1950s, but the first commercial device was not available until 1962. And then that commercial device that was available in 1962 was called the Bell 103 by AT&T. First modem allowed full duplex transmission and boasted data rates up to 300 bits per second. Shortly after the Bell 103, there came the Bell 212, which reached speeds of 1200 bits per second. It also employed a method of modulation called phase shift keying. This is a step up from the frequency shift keying FSK method that the Bell 103 employed. So the second thing on the timeline that we're going to go through is the U.S. government creates ARPA in 1958. So in 1957, only 12 years after the publication of Arthur C. Clarke's seminal paper describing the ideas of satellites, the Soviet Union launched the first satellite, beating the United States into space. This meant that the USSR could theoretically launch bombs into space and then drop them down anywhere on the Earth. And obviously the American military was highly alarmed. And so in 1958, the president appointed James Killian as the Presidential Assistant for Science and created an Advanced Research Projects Agency, which is ARPA, to jumpstart U.S. technology and find safeguards against a space-based missile attack. The U.S. military was particularly concerned about the effects of a nuclear attack on their communications infrastructure, because if they couldn't communicate, they wouldn't be able to regroup or respond, thereby making the threat of the first strike by the Soviet Union much more likely. So to meet this need, fix the problem, ARPA established the IPTO in 1962 with the mandate to build a survivable computer network to interconnect the DoD's main computers and the Pentagon, Cheyenne Mountain, and the SAC HQ. As described in the following pages, an initiative led to the development, blah blah blah. You can look at the rest of those pages here. And we learned about this in the very first lecture that we got from the very first chapter, and talked about how the very beginnings of the internet was ARPA, and how the internet was basically created in order to withstand a nuclear strike. Timeline number 3 is ASCII is developed, and that stands for American Standard Code for Information Interchange, and it functions as a common denominator between computers that otherwise had nothing in common. And it works by assisting standard numeric values to letters, numbers, punctuation marks, and other characters such as control codes. And uppercase A, for example, is represented by the number 65. So by 1960, there was no such standardization, and IBM's equipment alone used 9 different character sets. They were starting to talk about families of computers which needed to communicate. And so this just shows how revolutionary that this was, and how it really jump-started a lot of things in computers for the future. Number 4, we're looking at Danny Cohen developing the first real-time visual flight simulator. And so the first flight simulator, not based on wind, was used in 1910 for training and could be considered a structure. Simulator consisted essentially of 2 barrel halves, one placed on a pedestal and the other which represented a swinging cockpit. The pilot sat in the upper half barrel, which was moved manually, and then had to control various flight altitudes, orientation relative to Earth's horizon, which is altitude. And I thought that this excerpt here really explained how it affected us and how it was used. Number 5 is Ray Tomlinson inventing email. So the evolution of electronic mail developed in the story of a collaboration filled with personalities, software systems, and acronyms. The own involvement, and this is my own involvement, and that's the writer of this article from Washington Post, of electronic mail began in 1972, shortly after Ray Tomlinson chose the @ symbol to trigger his new mechanism for transmitting messages from one computer to another. So email had been existing on individual machines from at least 1965, according to technologist Tom Van Vleck, who was working with MIT at the time. Tomlinson, however, was the first to connect machines. I was an undergraduate studying psychology at the University of California, Los Angeles, when the ARPANET research group in engineering hired me to do technical editing and user support. So this kind of goes through how Ray Tomlinson really invented email, because before there had been messaging, but it had never been interconnected from one computer to another being transmitted. So thank you. Bye.